Hello there everyone, this is me Ethan here and welcome back to another film review, and today I am very excited because today I'll be finally reviewing Dune Part 2. On Sunday night on February 25th, I went to an early fan event premiere or whatever you want to call it for Dune Part 2. I got to see it 4 days early in IMAX, and today I'll be finally sharing my review for it. If you know me, you know I'm a big fan of Dune. I've been a fan of Dune since 2021, whenever the first film came out. I released like a 5-minute review, I think, for it, maybe a 10-minute review. I can't exactly remember. It wasn't very good. Then around a little under a week ago, I did a re-review after the 2 reissues that I watched in IMAX. You can check that out up here so you can get my full history of Dune and how much I love these books and the franchise now. I'm not going to get into that today with this review because it's already going to be pretty long. So if you want to know my history with Dune, go check that video out up at the top. Before I get into this review, I have a small side rant. This fan event was promoted from Regal and AMC to have a free mini poster, the IMAX poster with the 3 sandworms going into battle. You were able to get this poster for free if you went to this fan event for Dune Part 2 last Sunday. Now, I showed up 45 minutes early. There were already people there waiting for the movie, surprisingly. So I went up to the box office since I didn't see any posters laid out there like they normally would be about these posters. The employee there, he went to the back, he pulled out the thick stack of Dune posters. He was about to hand one to me, but then he got a call in on the radio saying, "Hey, we can't give these out until Friday, March 1st, whenever the film officially releases," which just baffled me. I tried to say, hey, look, here's AMC and Regal giving out these posters tonight for their event. Why aren't y'all? Now, obviously, this is my local theater that has an IMAX screen. This isn't an AMC. This isn't a Regal. They never promoted anything saying, hey, get this poster with your movie whenever you see it on Sunday, but everyone else did, and they already had the posters at the ready. You can't get the poster at the fan event for the people who paid a month in advance to see it early, but the people who go see it opening night, opening weekend, they do get it. It just didn't make any sense to me. That frustrated me, but that's probably most frustrated I'll be in this review. With that out of the way, this will be a mostly spoiler-free review. There will be a cutoff towards maybe the middle, towards the end of the video, where I will say, hey, this is where I get into spoiler territory, because I don't want to make 2 separate videos doing non-spoiler and spoiler. I think that's kind of reductive, and I don't really want to have to make 2 videos on this. I want to make one long video talking about everything, so if you haven't seen the movie, you can still get my thoughts on it spoiler-free, but if you have, or if you've read the book, and you want to know what happens and what my thoughts are and some crazy things that happen within the movie, you can check out that last part of the video, and there will be a chapter card down in the description if you just want to skip over to spoilers if you care about that, or if you don't want to get into spoilers, you can cut it off right at the end of the non-spoiler review. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So first off, obviously, visually, this film is insane. Greg Fraser is back as the cinematographer, director of photography. He did Rogue One, he did The Batman, he did Dune Part 1. His previous film was The Creator, and now he's doing Dune Part 2. I think he's the closest thing to Roger Deakins we have right now, even though Roger Deakins is still doing films. He's the next best thing, in my opinion, and boy, he still knocks it out of the park here. I'd say it looks even more beautiful than Dune Part 1, which I didn't even think was possible because Dune Part 1 is a stunning looking film. There's some scenes where like the sun is setting on Arrakis and it's this dark orange color in the sky that you don't see in the first film, and it looks beautiful. There's some scenes that are in darker environments. I'm not just saying darker in mood, but darker environments where the lights are darker or it's at night, but you can still see everything that's going on. That's a problem with more recent films, is if you're in a darker environment or if it's nighttime, sometimes you can hardly tell what's going on in some of these newer movies. But that's not a problem with Greg Fraser's films, and that was very obvious from The Batman, where so much of it's set at night, but you can still visually see everything that's going on. One of my favorite aspects of this film is the action, obviously. There's a lot more action in the way Greg Fraser composes these shots. There's a hand-to-hand combat scene at the end that you see in the trailers. There's sun setting in the background. It looks immaculate. And one of my other favorite aspects is whenever Greg Fraser cuts to a wide shot, whether it's just the sands, whether it's a temple, whatever it is, the worms, it cuts to a wide shot and it makes it feel massive in scope. Arrakis already feels huge in the first movie, but but so much more of this movie is set on Arrakis and takes place in Arrakis, and it feels even bigger than the first film. And whenever you cut to those wides or those establishing shots, I was just enamored by it. I was stunned. I just jaw dropped to the floor, stunned by it. And since we're looking at the technical aspects of the film right now, I have to talk about the sound design. From footsteps in the sand to a hand-to-hand battle to sandworms plummeting through sand, you hear it all, and it's got that nice kick and punch that you expected from that first Dune, still carried over. It sounds amazing in an IMAX theater, and if you're going to watch this film, do watch it in IMAX if you have it available for you. And obviously, speaking of sound, Hans Zimmer's score is still amazing in this one. I think it's a little more subtle than the first one. The first one has a lot of loud, booming music behind it, and I don't think there's quite as much of that in Dune Part 2. It's still very exaggerated, very loud, very bombastic. You want to hear it in an IMAX theater, but there are a little more calmer themes throughout. I think the Emperor's theme, or whenever we introduce Irulan, or even Chani and Paul's theme, I found to be a really sweet theme, and it reminded me a lot of Anakin and Padme's theme from Star Wars Attack of the Clones, which I really, really liked. And obviously, you have to bring up the direction here by Denis Villeneuve. He is a master at work here. I think it can be said without any hesitation that he's maybe the best sci-fi director currently working today, and easily one of the best directors working today, just in general. He's at another level here. I'd say he's at the same level as Blade Runner 2049 in this film, and oh my gosh, the way he directs some of these scenes are just incredible. I'm probably going to say incredible like 20 times throughout this review, but his direction is immaculate. From the action scenes to the more intimate moments, it's beautifully shot, it's also well choreographed, and it's damn near perfect direction. And since I brought up choreography, I'll go ahead and toss that in there too. These action scenes are so quick and fluid. It reminded me kind of the prequel fights in Star Wars, maybe closer to like episode 3, like the battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan, how fast-paced and quick those duels are. Some of the hand-to-hand combat scenes kind of remind me of that, except better and less over-choreographed, but the way how fluid and quick those maneuvers are, that's what it reminded me of. And that final hand-to-hand combat scene towards the end is wonderful. But once again, some of those bigger, larger-than-life action scenes with the sandworms and such are just insane. And I was once again, just gonna say again, blown away. Getting into the performances, Timothée Chalamet, what a guy right now. Wonka is still in theaters, it is still making money. I thought he was great in Wonka, but the jump from Wonka to Dune Part 2, from Willy Wonka to Paul Muad'Dib Atreides is an insane leap in acting. If we had gotten Dune Part 2 in November and then Wonka in December, it would kind of feel like a downgrade, honestly, because it's such a step up. I thought both performances were obviously great, but his performance here as Paul Atreides might just be his best. I have not seen every performance from him. I've seen a good handful of performances from him now. I think he's one of the best younger actors working today. This might just be his best performance yet, and I say that having not seen all of his performances. He is totally transformative in this role. There's a certain flip in his character, like a switch flips all of a sudden in the film. I won't say when it happens, but you know whenever it happens, whenever you watch it, and I was just in awe of what he was able to do. There's one scene in particular where he's in a crowded room and points out a certain character. If you haven't seen the film, you won't know what I'm talking about. But if you have, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about. It's toward the third act. He's in a large room with a bunch of people, and he points out one character in particular, and that scene immediately told me Timothée Chalamet is a movie star. There's been many discussions lately of, oh, we don't have real movie stars anymore, and Tom Cruise is the last true action movie star in Hollywood. This film made me believe that we still have Hollywood stars. Speaking of which, Zendaya is incredible here. If you missed out on Zendaya in part 1, if you wanted more from her, you get a lot more from her in part 2. She is definitely a main character, and I'd say this is one of, if not the best Zendaya performance we've gotten. I haven't seen her in Euphoria, but she is on another level here. She is incredible. There's so much that she says just with her eyes, and her expressions, and even some of the dialogue that she's given is so powerful whenever she speaks. They do change some stuff with their character, which at first I was frustrated by, but I'll get into that in the spoiler territory. But her chemistry with Timothée Chalamet I thought was great. I thought her romance with Paul Atreides was very strong. It was how I imagined it in the book, and I thought it was obviously much better than the 1984 film. It took its time to progress, and both of their performances worked so well together. Rebecca Ferguson is by far another standout as Lady Jessica. If you thought she was good in Dune Part 1, just wait until Dune Part 2. Her performance in this is so different compared to Part 1, and it is menacing, it is haunting, and it is terrifying at times what she's able to do. And part of that goes into spoilers with what happens with her character, which I won't get into, but the way Denis Villeneuve handled her character, it was perfect to me. The way I read her in the book was how I imagined her in this movie, and that's exactly how she was portrayed. I'm losing the ability to formulate my opinion on her performance, but it was incredible. She was so good in this. The costume design is once again amazing. She looks stunning in this, and I loved her performance. Christopher Walken as the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. I think I remembered his full name. He's not in as much of the movie as I anticipated, but I still thought that he serviced the plot and the story in the same way that the book did. Like I said, there are some changes from the book that end up changing how his character is portrayed, but overall, I enjoyed his performance, and hey, he's the Emperor. And obviously we have his daughter too, Princess Irulan, played by the amazing Florence Pugh. She looks amazing in this film. Look, the costume design for her is incredible. You see this like chainmail costume that she has on in the trailer. It is so cool. She gets so many cool costumes to work with in this film. But like the Emperor, she's not in a whole lot of it. I did like some of her dialogue and how she narrated at times what was going on Arrakis, very similar to what they did in the book. If you haven't read the book, but you have seen Star Wars The Clone Wars, you'll know that there's a quote before every episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars that kind of predicts and sends the whole message of the episode. The Princess Irulan does that basically in the book. At the beginning of every single chapter, you get a quote from her that basically gives off the premise or predicts or gives you an idea of what's going to happen in that chapter. And I love getting to see her do those little voice diaries for her book in the film. I just kind of got to nerd out over that and really enjoyed that. But overall, Florence Pugh has just this regal, authoritative, ethereal energy to her character in this film, and I loved it. I ate it up. Javier Bardem gets a lot to work with here as Stilgar. Once again, another standout performance. Pretty much all of these are standout performances in this film. Everyone is in their A game. I found his character to be really moving this time around. He's got a lot more religious fanaticism to him, and he's sort of the character that showcases the Fremen's ability to totally fall for Paul Atreides as this messiah. And it's honestly a bit terrifying at times, his performance. I found his performance to be pretty haunting at times, and he's also a comedic relief. Parts of his religious fanaticism are used as a little bit of levity for the film, which I appreciated, and he was really funny. He was already really funny in part 1, but he's even more comedic in part 2. I wasn't offended by it. They did not dumb down his character in any way. It was just a showcase of religious fanaticism, and I really enjoyed his performance. We also get Josh Brolin back as the wonderful Gurney Halleck. There was one thing that was missing that ended up being deleted from Dune Part 1 that is in the book that they brought back for Part 2 that I was very happy about. It's a very minor part of it. It is not impactful for the story whatsoever, but I was happy they included that part of his character. He's really good in this. Not as much to note about as for his character as there was for Javier Bardem or Rebecca Ferguson's, but I thought he was still really great in here. There's still like some real gut to his voice whenever he speaks. I always go back to the line where he's talking about the Harkonnens in the first one where he goes, "They're brutal," and you still get some of that from Josh Brolin. I wish we got a little bit more of that energy from him, but you still get a little bit of that, and I love it whenever he gets those moments to just, speak like that, and I don't know how to explain it, but I love those moments from him. Getting into more of the villainous side, Dave Bautista isn't as great in this film as I had hoped. He's maybe the only performance that I was disappointed by, which I love Dave Bautista. I think he's a wonderful actor. He's so good in Knock at the Cabin. I love him as Drax, obviously, but he's such a talented actor, and I wish we had gotten more from him. Obviously, we have Austin Butler's character kind of taking his place in the film, but I wish we had gotten a little more from him. Basically, all he has to do in the film is just scream and be angry all the time. He's kind of like Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens, but with less depth that you'd hope. He's still really cool looking in the film. He's still got a lot of power to his voice, a lot of menace. And I understand his character is kind of supposed to be dumb. If you look back at the '84 movie, his character is even more dumb and way worse in that movie. And that's kind of how he is in the book. He's the dumb grunt. But I was just hoping for more from him. And I think I've heard a little bit of this from other critics. This movie could have been 10, 20, 30 minutes longer to better progress some characters and add a little bit more depth. But overall, I didn't hate him in this. I just wish we could have maybe gotten just a little bit more from him beyond just him screaming and being mad at the Baron. Speaking of the Baron, we get Stellan Skarsgård back once again. He's great in this. The makeup is insane. He's still such a nasty, ugly, just messed up guy, and he's even more creepy in this film than he was in the first. Obviously, there's not as much of him because of Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha, who's really more the main villain of this film, I'd say. And oh my gosh, he may have given one of the best villain performances within the past 5 years or so. I thought he was insane. So creepy, so nasty, so seductive. He does not have the Elvis voice. The man is no longer Elvis. Oh my gosh. The introduction scene for him is one of the best villain introductions I've seen in a while. Incredibly shot. His performance is totally captivating. It hooks you in and never lets you go. And that final fist fight, or sword fight, I guess, between him and Paul Atreides that you do see in the trailer, it's not a spoiler. It's so well choreographed. I did not know Austin Butler had that in him. So much better in this film than he is in Elvis. He is movie star capable, and like I said before, this film made me believe that we still have movie stars today, and his performance is out of this world amazing. He is by far my standout performance for me. Timothy Zendaya, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, all these actors that I've just mentioned are incredible in this film, but by far the standouts to me were Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen and Rebecca Ferguson as the Lady Jessica. They were the two standout performances for me, and I would not be surprised if come next Oscar season, a year from now, if either of them get Best Supporting Actor or Actress nominations. I would not be surprised at all because they're totally transformative, out of this world, incredibly creepy, incredibly menacing roles that I was blown away by. And speaking of this being an adaptation, I've seen a decent bit of book purists be upset about this film, about what it changes, and I'll obviously get into that into the spoiler review section of this video, but there are some changes that are pretty small that don't matter too much. Okay, you could take out that character, you can include this character, but there are some changes they make in this film that are substantial, that change how Dune Messiah will be handled once Denis Villeneuve eventually makes that. The way this film ends, there has to be a Dune Messiah, in my opinion. It can work as part one and part two, and we can just have these two films, and I'll be okay with that. But I feel like there has to be a Dune Messiah. But the way this film ends, the way some characters are implemented, the way some of them are changed, it totally changes the way Dune Messiah will be handled, and possibly even Children of Dune, and literally any other book going forward. It is a substantial change, and there are some timeline changes from book to movie that I feel like some book purists are going to be frustrated by. But for me, there's some parts of this book where if you adapt it one-to-one, it is going to look goofy, and we saw that in Dune 1984. There are some extremely goofy moments in that film, especially with one character in particular, and you're never going to get a one-to-one adaptation from book to screen. It's just not something that's possible. At least I don't think so. And I feel that Denis Villeneuve made the changes in an important way that benefited on the screen, where you could still take the story seriously. It still has the same message that the book had so many years back in the 60s whenever Frank Herbert wrote it. It does change how the story will progress, but it does not change the message and overall themes of the film, which I was not offended by. Initially, I was frustrated at some changes in the way they changed some characters and some moments in the film where characters make certain decisions. I was initially frustrated by it as a fan of the book, but as it went on and by the time the film ended, I was okay with it. I respected the decision and I understood more of where Denis Villeneuve was coming from, considering how dense the original Dune book is and just how weird it is. Some stuff you just can't adapt, and that's understandable. It's not always going to be one-to-one. Dune Part 2 is a monumental achievement for cinema, and I am not saying that lightly. I may have some bias as a fan of the book, but objectively, this movie is really something special. I think it's the closest thing we have to Lord of the Rings today. I don't think it's quite as good as Lord of the Rings, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the Lord of the Rings franchise. I still need to watch those films a second time, but this film is really incredible. It's really something special. I've never seen something like this on the big screen. The closest comparison I can maybe make is Avatar and just its immersion and its world. But Dune's themes are much richer and deeper than Avatar's. So I was blown away. I said that maybe 3 or 4 times in this video already, but I was blown away by it. There's so much scope and scale and layers and different character motivations, plans within plans in this film. It's a lot to take in. I can't wait to watch it 2, 3 more times in the theater. I'm going to see it as much as I can in IMAX because I know Ghostbusters is going to take away those screens, which I hate. It's a monumental achievement. I would highly recommend this film. If you didn't love Dune Part 1, there's a chance you may love Dune Part 2. If you were just not into how weird Dune Part 1 was, you probably won't like Dune Part 2. If you're not into this crazy high concept sci-fi stuff that's super complex and you really have to pay attention and focus, and that sounded like a knock against people. It's not, but if you're not into that richer, deeper, weird sci-fi stuff that happened in Dune Part 1, you probably won't like Dune Part 2. Maybe you will, but you probably won't if you didn't like what was going on in Dune Part 1. If you thought Dune Part 1 was boring, you probably won't think Dune Part 2 is as boring. It's definitely a slow burn, still like the first film, but I think it had a better pacing to it, had a better energy going towards it. There's much more happening in Dune Part 2, for sure. If you thought not enough happened or not enough big events happened in Dune Part 1, you won't be disappointed by Dune Part 2. There's a lot of big things that happen throughout the entire film. Throughout all 3 acts, there's some major thing that happens that I feel if you weren't totally wowed by Dune Part 1, you'll probably be pretty impressed by Dune Part 2. And now all I hope is that we get to round this out with a trilogy from Denis Villeneuve with the Dune Messiah. I know he said his script is almost finished, but like I said, there are some changes to it from the original book that will change Dune Messiah, and that gets me excited. That gets me really excited. And it's not like a Marvel movie where it's a post-credit scene that's supposed to get you excited for the next project. No, it's a continuation of the story in the same way Lord of the Rings or Star Wars is, where it gets you excited to see where this is going to go. I feel like it does sort of leave off on a cliffhanger. It ends, it still finds its ending, it still sends its message, but the way it ends, I feel like there has to be a Dune Messiah. I'm giving Dune Part 2 a 10 out of 10. It is not a perfect film. There's no such thing as a perfect film, but in my eyes, it is perfect. This is obviously just my opinion as a Dune fan. I know so many people who are not a fan of Dune. I've had friends who have said it's boring, it's not for them, but even they're excited for Dune Part 2 after hearing some of these rave reviews, and even hearing from me. And they've switched up on Dune. They've revised their opinions after rewatching it. So I'm excited to see what happens with this film. I don't know how controversial it'll be with general audiences who haven't read the book, who may have no idea what happens in this film or how much changes from Part 1. But overall, I would highly recommend it just as an experience in the cinema. It is otherworldly. Now, I'm going to get into the spoiler section for Dune Part 2. Leave now or forever hold your peace. If you've read the book already, you will hear the changes from the book, which are from minor to major. So click off now if you do not want to hear any spoilers. So without any further ado, let's get into it. One of the major changes for me that I was surprised by was Chani's character. By the end of the Dune book, Chani is still going to get married to Paul Atreides. Or at least that's what happens in Dune Messiah, as far as I'm aware. She's the concubine, and he's actually married to Princess Irulan, but there's no love interest between him and Princess Irulan whatsoever. But by the end of the film, Chani is very frustrated with Paul. They still obviously both love each other. There's still something there, but she doesn't bow down to Paul Atreides, which I found kind of fascinating, but a good choice. I think Chani being the self-insert character for the audience is important to show the dangers of charismatic leaders, as Frank Herbert intended. But knowing there's a chance that Dune Messiah may or may not happen, I think that was the best way to go about Chani's character, her disagreeing with Paul and not just conforming to his beliefs as a Messiah. I think that was a great choice. I was initially kind of in between on it, but I agreed with the decision that Denis Villeneuve made that Chani should not just follow through with Paul, but that, like I said earlier, it does change a lot of Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, because Chani and Paul eventually do have children. If Chani is so against Paul by the end of Dune, are they going to bear children? Are there going to be children of Dune? That impacts a potential fourth movie, an adaptation of the third book, if that happens. Now, if it just stays a trilogy, sure, it's fine. But Chani's decision to not stay with Paul impacts a lot of what's to come, and I was kind of fascinated by it. Now, a big change up is Alia, and that'll probably be the biggest controversy. There's a major timeline change from the book to the film. In the book, there's a 2-year time jump where Paul and the Lady Jessica spend 2 years with the Fremen, Siege Tepper with Stilgar and Chani and all the Fremen. That's where the love develops between Paul and Chani, and after that point, Alia is 2 years old. She is a toddler, and she can speak like a fully grown adult because she has all the memories. I think I've got this right. All the memories of the past Reverend Mothers, including the Lady Jessica. So she has incredible power, can speak like an adult despite looking like a toddler. Now in the 84 movie, it is extremely goofy. It looks really stupid, incredibly hard to adapt. What Denis Villeneuve did instead was there's no time jump. Alia is still a fetus in the womb with Jessica, and essentially Alia just speaks to the Lady Jessica and helps her manipulate the Fremen into believing Paul as the Muad'Dib, the Lisan al-Gaib, which I found to be a great move. I really wanted to see if Denis Villeneuve would adapt a toddler speaking like a fully grown adult woman, but I realized that's just kind of a goofy looking thing, and I don't think there's any way you can adapt that without it looking silly. Anya Taylor-Joy does in fact play an older Alia, but it's in Paul's prescient visions in the future, which I think was a kind of cool idea. You get to see an older Alia, you still get to see her there, but she is never born in the film. Not obviously it changes the ending, so instead of Alia killing the Emperor with her Gom Jabbar, it's Paul, which I think is a little more powerful, in my opinion. I actually like that change quite a bit. I know it'll be controversial. I was initially kind of confused by that change, especially considering you open the film within the first 10, 20 minutes or so, and you see inside the womb of Jessica, you see Alia there. You see this baby developing. So you think that this baby is going to be born, but there's no time jump. There's nothing like that, which makes sense. Obviously, you maybe have to age up the characters a little bit more, possibly, but overall, I think that worked out pretty well with Alia. I like the way they executed her character, and I think it's the best route they could have possibly gone on. And next up, we have the character of Margot Fenring, who's played by Lea Seydoux, who I actually didn't mention in the actors category, which I should have, but I think she was really solid in this film. I haven't seen anything from her previously. Still own the James Bond movies, I just haven't seen her in those, but I thought she was solid in it. She's not in a lot of it, but there's a major character change where she is pregnant with Fade Rotha's son, which changes up a lot. It's supposed to keep the Harkonnen lineage going, which I found really fascinating. And that leads me into something with the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim, who admits to Princess Irulan that she convinced the Emperor to take out House Atreides, which is way different from the book. The Emperor wanted to take out House Atreides in the book. And in the movie, it's the convincing of the Reverend Mothers to take out the Atreides household, which changes a lot. It's a pretty major change from the book, and I found that to be kind of cool because we know that the Reverend Mothers and the Bene Gesserit influence so much, and we see that in the book, but I think it's emphasized even more by the fact that Margot Fenring is now bearing a child to keep the Harkonnen lineage, along with obviously the Bene Gesserit. That changes once again a lot. You don't have Margot Fenring's daughter in Dune Messiah. There's no such thing. So that once again changes the sequel. And that gets me really excited because, I mean, I'm almost through Dune Messiah, but that gets me excited to watch the next movie because I'm already excited to see what they do with the Bene Tleilaxu and all the other crazy concepts in Dune Messiah and the Gola and the character of Hate, which if you don't know who he is, if you haven't read Dune Messiah, if you don't know who he is, I won't spoil that for you, but it's very, very cool stuff. I'm already excited to see what Denis Villeneuve adapts and how he adapts it in Dune Messiah because it's so different. There's guild navigators, there's a lot more guild navigators in Dune Messiah, and there were none in Dune Part 2, which I wasn't surprised by. They look pretty goofy. It's hard to adapt that kind of stuff. I was hoping we'd get one, but we didn't. I'm not totally disappointed by it, though. But there's a lot in Dune Messiah that gets a lot weirder, and knowing that Margot Fenring is bearing a Harkonnen daughter gets me excited to see what Dune Messiah could be like, because there's already a lot that's going to happen with Chani's character, so it'll be an almost entirely different thing from the book, which I already love. I think I like Dune Messiah better than the first book. So it just gets me very, very excited to see what Denis Villeneuve will do next. And now, still speaking of Fenring, we get no Count Fenring character. Tim Blake Nelson was cast in this film, or at least rumored for a long time, and he's, I think, still on the casting list. He's not in this movie. I don't know what happened to him. I thought he was going to play Count Fenring, who is important to, obviously, the Emperor's character and Margot Fenring's character. He was just not in this movie, which kind of bummed me out because I liked his character quite a bit. I was excited to see him in it, but they took him out. It's understandable. It doesn't impact a lot because Margot's character has changed so much from the book, but I was just kind of surprised to see that Count Fenring was not there. And speaking of characters who weren't included, we don't get any more Thufir Hawat. It's just assumed that he died at the Battle of Arakim, which is very unfortunate to me because I really liked Hawat's character, especially in the latter half of Dune. He is a more important, vital character. The Baron uses Hawat for his Mentat abilities, but Hawat still serves his leader. He still serves his Duke, which is Leto, which is Paul. And I really liked Hawat's character in the last half of the book. And I really wish he was in the movie. He was still on the casting list for Dune Part 2, but I'm assuming he just got cut. And I really, really hope that Denis Villeneuve gets out of this weird mindset that he doesn't like a director's or extended cut, because I would love to see a director's or extended cut for Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. I think it could largely benefit from it. And I wish we could have seen Hawat. I know there was some sort of Screen X preview for Dune Part 2 that we see months back for one of the Dune trailers, in that Screen X format where they have the screens on the side that are extended, and on like the right side of the screen you can see the actor for Hawa there with Harkonnens, and that got me so excited to see what they did with this character. But you just don't see him. That may be a hot take, but I don't care. I really wanted Hawa in this movie. Like I said, it's still a 10 out of 10 movie for me. I think it's still a great adaptation. They didn't cut corners, but they had to take out some characters, take out Guild Navigator, take out Count Fenring, take out Thufir Hawat. I was disappointed by that, but it's not enough disappointment for me to absolutely hate the movie. I still loved it. And one thing I especially liked about the Fremen in this movie was there was diversity of thought and opinions of Paul. In the book, they kind of just seem like sheep, honestly. They just go with the flow and just, oh yeah, we'll just follow Paul. But there's South Fremen, there's North Fremen. Obviously, the Bene Gesserit have plans within plans. They influence the Fremen greatly, and I thought the fact that there were differing opinions, and especially with Chani disagreeing with the whole idea that that Paul is this Messiah, I found it to be much better and much more respectful of these natives of Arrakis. The fact that some of them wouldn't believe in this Messiah, I think, made for some fascinating drama with Chani and these other Fremen, and I think it humanized the Fremen in a much better way than what Frank Herbert did. And obviously, there's some more suspicion in Dune Messiah, but in the original book, you just don't get much of that. And I really like that addition to the movie. I think it added more characterization to the Fremen, more world building in general. With, you got the South Side who obviously have like a different accent. That's why Javier Bardem sounds different than Chani, and Chani has a much more American soft-spoken accent. That was part of my problem with Dune Part 1 a little bit with Chani, is that I didn't believe she was a part of the same tribe as Javier Bardem because they speak so differently. And even Jamis in the first film spoke a little differently. They all kind of spoke differently, despite being in the same siege and within the same area. I was intrigued by, would they ever explain that? And yeah, Chani is North Fremen, Stilgar is South Fremen. They have different belief systems, and some of them don't believe in the Messiah, some of them do. And I really, really enjoyed that addition to the film, and it enhanced the book and they fixed an aspect of the book that I initially thought was just kind of one-dimensional. The Fremen were just sheep that followed Paul, and adding that extra dimension of disagreement helped the movie out greatly. And it kind of helps with Frank Herbert's message of religious and political fanaticism and not looking up to charismatic leaders and believing in them so much, because sometimes they're wrong and they're not the right people to follow, and we can't always believe one man or one woman to fix all of our problems. And even still to this day, that message holds true. So I thought having some Fremen disagree greatly helped that message, and obviously with Chani, it puts us into that perspective as well. And one final thing, I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but there's no quick negotiations with the guild towards the end with Paul to become emperor. In the book, it feels kind of rushed with Paul becoming the emperor. He has a quick negotiation with the guild. The guild navigators, or I guess just the guild in general, aren't there for that final battle. Instead, it's just is it the Landsrad that wrote? Yeah, it's the Landsrad and the Emperor that are there. And it's not a quick negotiation. The Emperor's like, no, dude, you're not becoming the Emperor. And it turns into a much bigger war, and it adds some much needed action on top of just the sword fight between Feyd-Rautha and Paul Atreides. And I appreciated that much more. It felt a lot less rushed and make much more sense. It didn't happen so quickly. Something big had to come out of it, and it wasn't a quick and easy negotiation like it was in the book. So that was much improved from the book. So I think with that said, my voice is so dead after this. I think that's all I have to say for my spoiler review. I know it's gonna What's up, guys? This is Editing Ethan here, and I completely forgot to finish this review and the outro. I ran out of storage on my phone while recording it as I was just wrapping up one section, but basically all I was going to say after that was I feel that Dune Part 2 enhances Dune Part 1, and I enjoy Dune Part 1 even more thanks to Dune Part 2. And I feel like together, if you watched both of them as like a 5.5 hour movie, it would be even better and it would be an amazing experience. But other than that, that's pretty much going to do it for my review. I'm not going to make this video any longer than it has to be. It's going to be so long. It's going to take so long to edit. But if you all enjoyed this review and if you all enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Bye and have a great day.